what I call this presentation is immigration to Confluence, not just migration, because immigration is, it's like going to a foreign country and going through foreign customs. So the subtitle is A Journey Through Foreign Customs. Now the foreign customs we'll be talking about is, let's see, Adobe. Is anybody familiar with Adobe RoboHelp or Framemaker? Okay, and Acrobat, okay. Those are the ones that are foreign, and you'll find out in a minute. I am a technical writer. I've been doing that for about 15 years, so I finally had to admit it. And that's the way I make my living, at least for right now. So one of the things that I thought about when putting this program together is I speak rather, I want to say ill. Do y'all understand that about Framemaker? It's not my favorite piece of software. Okay, so people have asked me, well, why didn't you stop using it? Why didn't you switch to something else? And what I explained was, it's like being in a bad relationship for a long time. I already know all of Framemaker's faults, and if I had to give it up and learn some other software faults, then it represented a break in production. So it was like the girlfriend I didn't want to break up with. So how many of you guys are familiar with Confluence, are currently using it for, using it for technical documentation too? And do you publish directly to the web out of Confluence? How many do that?
No.
Okay, and how about exporting to another form? What form?
HTML and Eclipse help.
Oh, okay, good. And was someone else? Okay, good. And how many of you who don't use Confluence are considering switching to it at some time soon? Okay, we'll make believers out of them.
Stand by.
So the story is, I started using Confluence. Actually, I started to work for a company that produced documentation in Framemaker, and they produced bound books, and that is correct, printed bound books, which is like the bane of technical writers, because as soon as the masters are closed, they're out of date. And then we would go and print those, and they were about $2 a piece, and they would go out with the salespeople and go up on the shelf, and that's where they stayed. So one of the first things I did was to stop the printing of bound books, and got back about $1,500 into my budget. We also produced the PDFs for release notes and some updates and some installation guides and such like that. And we did it out of Framemaker. One of the things that I wanted to do with this company that I was working for, that's Rockwell. And by the way, how many of you know Rockwell? Okay, how many of you know the Apollo lunar project, where we sent the astronauts up and over to a movie set in New Mexico somewhere?
No, get that joke.
Okay. Anyway, that's the company that I was working for, a different division of the company. One of the requirements I had, or the set of requirements that I had for something to replace Framemaker, was that it had to be, number one, it had to be standards-based. I wanted something that was outside of the control of a corporation that could change their product at will without checking it out with me, and it could upset my life and my productivity. So it had to be standards-based, where there was thousands of people out in the world deciding how things should be and arguing about it and coming to some conclusions and some agreements, and then publishing the standard. Some form of SGML. HTML, XML, some markup language. It also had to have a logical structure. One of the things that I had in mind was I wanted to bring other people into the fold of technical writing. I was, in my department in R&D, all of the guys to my right had doctorate degrees in mathematics. And one of them had a doctorate degree in mathematics and in electrical engineering. And they all think that they can write good documentation. So I wanted a way to allow them to write something, but then come back to me and filter it and do a little technical writer magic on it. So it had to have a logical structure that was easy to teach. It had to be single source. You know, one of my rules of thumb is you never write the same sentence twice. If you can mark it somehow and chunk it, we call it chunking. If you can mark it and chunk it and use it someplace else, that's great, and that leads us to reusable content, and that was one of my goals. So one of the things I did not like about Framemaker was high acquisition cost and steep learning curve. If I had to teach it to someone else, it would take a year for them to become modestly proficient. So this is a story about a guy that set out on a great expedition to discover this solution. And he set out with great trepidation, feeling adventurous, to walk through the arid Adobe Outback. And in this strange land, he encountered many foreign and peculiar customs. And one of the foreign customs was that Adobe was proprietary and unnecessarily complex. One of the things that I really didn't like about it was the storage format was a binary form. So if I wanted to get in there and tweak something, to fix something, I had to go back to the source and then rebuild the entire thing. I also worked with a product I call Robo No Help, that made my life even more difficult. And then Acrobat Pro, which by itself, producing documentation, most of you guys know, it would do well, but then if you had to go back and change something, like the director of development wanted you to go back and change a particular sentence about a particular feature of the product, he would ask you to do it in the PDF, which of course is a no-no. And then I also used the technical communication suite from Adobe. Now, our adventurer found this to be unnecessarily confusing and complex, and he decided to do something else. And what he did was he authored in Eclipse, and that is taking HTML, writing the documentation in Eclipse, having the table of contents and the index generated as pointer files in XML, and then spitting that out into jar files and putting it into the product. And when I converted from Framemaker to Eclipse, there was a lot of handwork that was left because of handwork? Yeah, headwork too. The conversion scripts that I used, and a little utility called MIF to go, M-I-F. MIF is what does it mean? Maker Interchange Format. It's a proprietary format that Adobe uses, that Framemaker uses. And I had a little utility that would map the different elements from Framemaker to HTML, but it was not complete. So anyway, the conversion scripts did not do the entire job, so I spent a couple of more months with, by the way, I meant to tell you this to begin with, I had 11 books, understand the book concept in Framemaker, with many, many chapters in each book. And of course, each book was in its own separate folder. And in Framemaker, the folder is the boundary. So this particular book can't talk to that book, can't talk to that book. You can't create cross-book links. One of the things you can do is export it all to PDF, just build a PDF into a portfolio. But you have to establish what are essentially dead links first, and then export it, see if they work. If they don't work, go back to Framemaker, and that's enough about that. So the conversion scripts I had did not have a lot of accuracy. I decided, as I was doing this conversion, to stay with the book paradigm, which you will see as soon as the light lights up, that, and I decided to keep this structure because my kind of guiding principle was I didn't want to change too many things at once. When I arrived on the job, they already had a system that was working, not well, and it was very expensive, which kind of runs against my Scottish background. I just hate to spend a lot of money on something that should be very simple. So I didn't want to make too many changes at once. And the conversion from Framemaker to Eclipse is painful, and I kept the book structure. And then I used Eclipse to write and produce documentation, that is, authoring directly in HTML in a manual build process. I would actually take the HTML out, put it in a particular place for our RCP application, build jars out of it, throw the context-sensitive mapping files in there, and then build it. Until I found K15t Software. Oh, No, pardon me, I haven't, there we go. So what this amounted to was a lot of authoring and production in what I refer to as the Total Eclipse. And it was quite a process. There were a lot of technical writers that could not believe that I was using Eclipse as an authoring platform. However, if you've ever looked at Eclipse help, I don't know whether Microsoft built the chum help, you know, the chums with the HHK, HHC. I don't know if they built that based on Eclipse or whether Eclipse came later, the chicken and the egg thing. But they're very, very similar. It's not a bad paradigm to follow. So then I would go from Eclipse to Confluence, which was my next conversion or immigration, if you want. And of course, you know, if you're in HTML, there's not a really good way to map HTML elements to go up into Confluence. So again, I was faced with a lot more handwork. One of the things that I found out about Confluence, though, was copy and paste worked fairly well. And I was quite well versed in wiki markup, so it was only a matter of learning the little idiosyncrasies about Confluence to take all of the content and put it over into the Confluence platform. And then what I wanted to do was export from Confluence to Eclipse help. And in Framemaker, I had the authoring, in the Framemaker conversion to Eclipse help, I authored in Eclipse, and then I converted from Eclipse help to Confluence, and then I produced Eclipse. This is getting confusing to me, I got the notes. Then I produced Eclipse help using the Scroll Wiki Exporter plugin. Now, has anyone heard of the Scroll Wiki Exporter plugin? I hope so. A lot of my presentation depends on that. And as luck would have it, I found out about the Eclipse Help Exporter plugin, I think while it was still in beta. It was pre-version 1 maybe, or it's just 1 dot something beta. But it was an early spin of the Eclipse Help Exporter, and I really enjoyed it. I thought I had found the solution to everything that I needed to do in Confluence. I brought 11 books of Framemaker into one platform. I could, if you're familiar enough with Confluence, you know you can tag work with labels. It's with the Scroll Wiki Exporter now, it's even more powerful. So I could produce an admin guide and a user's guide and release notes and whatever else I could think of out of the same content. So that answered the reuse issue for me. It also answered the single source issue. The ease of learning wiki markup for someone who has never known it answered another one of the requirements I had. I could sit an engineer down and he could say, how do you make a bold? How do you make an italic? How do you start a new paragraph? And it was very easy to just show them the first couple of things, and then they were gone. And once I showed them how to find out the answers, engineers will seek out those answers. So it was really easy to convert, and that answered all my requirements. Oh gosh, as many of you know, this presentation came from the Atlassian Summit last year, and I threw in a little commercial there for K15t, who makes tools for wiki documentation, solutions that make documentation easier so everyone can contribute information and track the process. And then Scroll Wiki exporters for Eclipse help, either the RCP or the Info Center. Do y'all know what Info Center is in Eclipse? A little like a kiosk. It is a kiosk mode. And the guys at K15t are Atlassian experts since 2002. Did I get that right?
Something, yeah.
A long time. Longer time.
It's not 10.
That's fine.
It's about the same.
It's still a long time. So I used the K15 Scroll Wiki Exporter to, now I'm sorry, I don't have any animation on this slide, I ran out, to export all of the HTML, the table of contents XML pointer files, the index pointer files, all of the images. I threw my own style sheets in there, and I also had a regular expression that I ran after the export to do a little bit of fancy stuff that I wanted to do to the exported jars. I'd actually open the jars, run the regular expression, then jar them back up, and then feed them to the build process. So I was using Scroll Wiki Exporter directly out of Eclipse to produce Eclipse help. And the way that worked, after I installed the plugin, I found a new option in the Confluence Tools menu. Now Confluence looks a little bit different than it does here in this slide, but it's still the same principle. There's still a Tools drop-down menu. And I found this new option, and it was Export to Eclipse Help. And I clicked this link, and it opens an export configuration wizard. And what happens is, under the General tab, there are several options. I chose the default Eclipse Help template, and that worked very well for me in all conditions. And when I wanted to export, I decided I'll just choose the top level parent, and I'll export this page and all the children, because still I'm keeping with that book paradigm, and I want to take everything out as if it were still in a book. I wanted it to process all the table of contents macros, which are generally at the top of the page or on a sub-parent page, a step-parent page in the chapter, and then process all the child macros. I also wanted to merge a single file and the first heading in the title page. And all of that I could set up in configuration during the export. So I chose this page and all of its children. I specified the balance of the export options. I exported the jars, and I added the jars to my product build process, which by this time was still automated. And then after I configured and exported the Confluence content, I saved my export settings, which is a process you can do with the Scroll Wiki Exporter. And that's where all of the settings or preferences are saved so that you can use them again without having to reconfigure the export process. And not being a real creative guy, I named my settings My Eclipse Export. So you can save your setting name as whatever you want to call it, whatever is significant to you. And later on, I ended up saving them as specific versions. So, I put a flashy arrow in there. That's where the export settings are. Now, for this build process, we used Bamboo, which is another Atlassian product that will do product builds for you. It'll gather up all the pieces and bits that need to go in the product, and it'll massage them and put them together in the right order at the right time, the way you want it. So we could iterate over this process very, very quickly. And what I needed to do was to create, and I used this REST API, that's a lot of letters, URL to automate the process. Once I created the credentials, all of the credentials, all the settings are in that URL. They're hashed or something, encoded in the URL. So I gave Bamboo a username and password for the automated process, and I gave Bamboo this URL to log on with. So when Bamboo took off to build the products, it would go to Confluence, and during the build process, it would export content, jarred up, and throw it into the product. So it was a really nice automated operation. And here's what the URL looks like. Pardon me. Well, y'all read that URL. It's not a very interesting read, but it's short. So after that, we're getting back to our explorer now. He was scarred, beaten, and bruised, yet he was still agile, but he had enough of this scrummy adventure. So he coursed the Straits of Budget, which he's done a lot, were the tributaries of collaboration, knowledge capital, and information flow to navigate to the delta of the Great Confluence. So I use, you haven't seen this, Toby?
No, I haven't.
It's been a year. So I now use Confluence not only as an authoring tool, but as a production tool. Because I've got the K15t exporter, I don't need another tool set. By the way, I'm working for a different company. I'm going to divert here just a minute. I'm working for a different company now, and I'm doing the same thing that I was doing with Rockwell. They've got a bunch of documentation that was in static HTML, let that soak in, and there was a table of contents on each page. a static HTML table of contents. So I know, that's what I said. So anytime I wanted to change a page title or a URL, I had to change it on every single one. And I couldn't use a search and replace because that string could be somewhere in the document. So I had to change every single one. I had I think it was 161 pages, give or take. So my first order of business was setting up some kind of JavaScript or something that would pull title page names and generate a table of contents for me. But about that time, my boss, who had read my profile on LinkedIn, said, "Hey, you're pretty good with Confluence, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, Germans say that, but I don't know." So he said, "Look, how much would it cost to get a license for Confluence and just have you convert this product only from HTML to Confluence?" And I said, "Well, do you want everybody else on the license?" He said, yeah. I said, "Well, $10. And I don't know, are y'all familiar? It's for a 10 user or 10 seat license, it's $10. So I bought it myself and got them to reimburse me for it. Had to buy a couple of plugins, including an HTML plugin and the Eclipse help. Let's see, did I use Eclipse help? No, I've got the scroll versions plugin and the I think PDF plugin. Anyway, I've got a lot of plugins from K15t. And still, all in all, I am at about, I don't know, $500, $550 for our entire department. All 10 writers, or all 7 writers, plus a couple of the engineers that I would like to have come in and maybe modify a few things. And everyone else in the company who wants to read the documentation. Now currently, what I'm doing, this is past the pro forma stage. My boss wanted me to do a proof of concept just to show him how it could be done and if it would be effective. While all the other 6 technical writers are converting from Word. I just want to pause a minute. Yes, they're writing documentation in Word. They're converting from that. There's still a lot of strange things done in technical writing. They're converting from Word to Madcap Flare, which I pointed out to my boss is a proprietary format. I asked, how much is the license? He said, $999 per seat. So anyway, he let me go ahead and do this proof of concept, which is where I am now, and I'm in the cleanup process. And eventually what I will do is convert an incoming product that I have. I'm taking responsibility for another product that's in Word. Oh, and as a proof of concept, my boss wanted to see me convert a Word document to Confluence. Have y'all ever done that? It takes about that long. He asked me, he said, "How long do you think it'll take you to convert that Word document?" I said, "How many pages?" He said, "It's 230 something, give or take." And I said, 30 seconds. They said, "No, come over here and see." Okay, open it up, import Word, there it is. And do all of the heading breaks exactly the way that I wanted them. As a matter of fact, just for his amusement, I made a mistake the first time. I broke everything on a topic change rather than break everything at a head 1. And I said, "Oh, I'm in a second, I'm gonna have to start over." So I just started over, which was a good proof of concept for him, and it still took about 30 seconds. So I'm using, or about to use, Confluence not only as an authoring tool, but as a production tool to design, author, and edit documentation, release notes, administrative references, installation guides, even marketing stuff. If my marketing people want to get into it and pull some text out and use it in whatever evil way they use stuff. And this is all possible because of this, I started to say very simple plugin, but it's not. The simplicity is in my side. The complexity is in the backside, in the K15t side, where the guys have designed this product and thought out how it should go together and thought out what my processes are as a technical writer. So when you build complexity into a product like that, it makes the other side, my side, much, much simpler. So let's see, where did I go? I got off on how good K15t is. Oh yeah, I added some more bullets. So the benefits of using Confluence was, these are text files. We're going back to my 4 requirements. These are text files. There's no proprietary binaries, no proprietary format. There's a logical structure to it that I could teach anyone. They're markup, they're standards-based. Somebody who's in development, I could say, look, this is based on W3C, it's born out of SGML. Here's the documentation, just take a look, you got questions, call me. It was logical and easy to teach new authors that didn't have a background in any of the markup languages. And just stand over their shoulder or be available to them. And it's fully customizable. Atlassian has what I consider to be a unique marketing structure in that they produce a base software product, and then they have this entire community throughout the world of third-party vendors, just like K15t, who become essentially the sales force, and they have a built-in interest in the success of Atlassian. Atlassian has a built-in interest in the success of K15t, and it works very, very well for the people who are purchasing both products and using them on the side of the side that I use them on. So it's customizable, and there's a large user community, and the return on investment is almost immediate. Also, it's stable. This is another reason I like using Confluence. I've got my current instance of Confluence is running on a Unix box with 20 gig of memory, and I forgot how many terabytes, in a Class 1 data center in Colorado with a 5-second failover to another Class 1 data center in Virginia. It has never gone down, it has never hiccuped, and I hammer Confluence. I've got, I don't know, a dozen, maybe 15 spaces that I import stuff into and then export out of, and I'm testing all the time while I've got a production space that I'm doing my actual work, and the rest of them I just play in. It's also fast and efficient. Anyone can fix an issue. And by the way, this was written right after, or right before Atlassian converted from the wiki markup storage format to the basically dynamic HTML, XML-ish format, which I like because it observes a very specific structure, and it's got to be legal and valid. So but they have a text editor that does the checking there, and the text editor is the issue. As I was writing this, they were using wiki markup. They changed in the middle of all this to using the markup language storage format, and came out with a new product that I called the retro text editor, because it was a little buggy when it first came out. Now, I believe that the decision to change that text editor was a stroke of genius. It works very, very well now. And then the last benefit, certainly not the last, but the last of my slides, is that Confluence enables, actually encourages collaboration. I gave the developers their own space, so they could write up feature specs, function specs, they could kibitz back and forth between each other, and because I was admin, I could go in there and see what they were talking about and get some ideas that would help me too. So I found Confluence to be economical, compatible, non-proprietary, and prone to making people write a lot of bullets. Oh, and this is, I want to tell you, K15t, are you guys going to Summit again? I would hope so. They were official sponsors at the, oh, and there's some of my lousy German. Yeah, I speak German like a Texan. Is that correct?
Yeah.
They're good people? They are. They're still good people, and I've known them for a little over a year. And the whole idea I want you to come away with is that Confluence is a great adventure. If you're not using it right now, the guys at K15t make it easy. And if they don't make it easy, give me a call and I'll see what's going on. And I'll try to help you if I can. Thanks a lot for your patience, and I'm going to hang around and drink beer and eat pizza and talk to you guys.
maybe one question. Are you
Yeah.
going to have another talk this year in Summit?
Another what?
Another talk?
Oh, no, as a matter of fact, I sent in an abstract. They asked me this year. I sent an abstract, I wasn't selected. My topic was, in Texas we have a saying, that just ain't right. And it was going to be based on, why are you doing it the hard way? Why are you doing it the expensive, the complex way, and producing poorer results? It just ain't right. And then going into how to use your plugins and Confluence. But maybe next year.
Yeah.
I should be at Summit.
Or maybe at the TCOM next year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll go anywhere I need to go for beer and pizza. Thanks very much, you guys. I'm around for questions and answers. Mostly answers. If y'all have any answers, let me know.